Welcome back to Mystery Minds, the channel where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime, uncovering stories that shock, intrigue, and leave us questioning the world around us. In today's case, we bring you a chilling and twisted tale, one of betrayal, deception, and a deadly obsession. This is the story of Hollywood and the mob deal with the devil. A tale of power, greed, and dangerous alliances. This case will leave you wondering, how far would someone go to make it to the top? And what happens when the line between fame and crime blurs? Stay with us as we unravel the dark and tragic story of Hollywood's most infamous mob connection. Devon Moretti and Eva DeMarco seemed destined for the Hollywood spotlight, but behind the glittering facade, their lives were entwined in a deadly web of betrayal, ambition, and organized crime. Devon, a powerful producer with ties to the infamous Russo family, thought he had mastered the art of survival in a world of corruption. Eva, a rising starlet with secrets of her own, had infiltrated his world with a hidden agenda fueled by revenge. Neither realized that their collision would ignite a chain of events that would bring Hollywood's darkest secrets to light and leave a trail of destruction in its wake. In the glitzy world of Hollywood, where fame and fortune often mask the darkness lurking beneath, Devon Moretti seemed to be living the dream. A man of charm and ambition, he had carved out a reputation as one of the most promising film producers of his time. Behind the perfectly tailored suits and the polished smile, however, Devon's rise to the top had been anything but clean. His career was built on secrets, dangerous ones, and the whispers that followed him hinted at a connection far more sinister than anyone dared to say out loud. Devon's story began as a young dreamer struggling to break into the cutthroat entertainment industry. Hollywood had little patience for those without deep pockets or powerful friends, and Devon had neither. But he did have one advantage: a willingness to do whatever it took to succeed. It wasn't long before he caught the attention of the Russo family, a name that struck fear into anyone who understood the shadowy underbelly of Los Angeles. The Russos weren't just a mob family, they were the puppet masters of a secret empire, with hands in everything from nightclubs to politics and, of course, Hollywood. At first, the partnership seemed mutually beneficial. The Russos saw in Devon a man who could be molded, someone hungry enough to take risks but smart enough to play by their rules. They provided the funding for his first major production, a gamble that paid off when the film became a box office hit. For Devon, it was a dream come true. For the Russos, it was the start of a lucrative arrangement. The money they funneled through his movies wasn't just for making films, it was a way to clean their dirty cash, turning ill-gotten gains into legitimate profits. The arrangement, while dangerous, worked seamlessly for years. Devon became a familiar face at red carpet events, his films earning acclaim and his name growing synonymous with success. But his newfound status came with strings attached, and those strings were pulled by the Russos. By day, Devon was a respected producer rubbing elbows with A-list stars. By night, he was attending secret meetings in dimly lit back rooms, ensuring the Russos' demands were met without fail. For a while, he managed to juggle both worlds, but the higher he climbed, the more precarious his position became. The trouble began when Devon set his sights on an ambitious new project, a gritty crime thriller that promised to redefine his career. It was the kind of movie that could solidify his place as a Hollywood legend. But it was also the kind of project that demanded more money than even the Russos were willing to provide up front. Desperate to make his vision a reality, Devon began courting investors outside the family's circle, a move that would soon put him in direct conflict with the people who had made him who he was. Unbeknownst to Devon, his decision to seek outside funding didn't go unnoticed. The Russos had eyes everywhere, and their patience for disloyalty was razor thin. While they allowed him some freedom to pursue his ambitions, they made it clear that their interests came first. Devon, however, had begun to taste the kind of power that made him reckless. He wasn't content with being a pawn in the Russo family's game. He wanted to play by his own rules, even if it meant taking risks that could cost him everything. The cracks in his carefully constructed life began to show. On the surface, he was still the picture of success, but behind the scenes, whispers of betrayal began to circulate. There were rumors of Devon meeting with a rival mob family, whispers that he was trying to cut the Russos out of his biggest deal yet. Whether or not the rumors were true, the mere suggestion was enough to put a target on his back. As the production of his new film moved forward, the tension surrounding Devon reached a breaking point. The once friendly glances from the Russo enforcers who lingered on his sets had turned into cold, calculating stares. Devon knew he was being watched, but he believed he could outsmart everyone. After all, he had done it before. What he didn't realize was that the stakes had never been higher, and the people he was dealing with had no tolerance for mistakes. One fateful evening, a subtle warning arrived in the form of a broken window at his Beverly Hills office. Devon brushed it off, convincing himself it was nothing more than a random act of vandalism. But deep down, he knew better. The Russos didn't make idle threats. The message was clear: they were watching, and his every move was under scrutiny. Despite the growing danger, Devon pressed forward with his plans, determined to see his film completed at any cost. He believed he could keep the Russos at bay while secretly maneuvering behind their backs. What he failed to understand was that he was no longer the one in control. The web of lies and deceit he had spun was tightening around him, and the players in this deadly game were far more ruthless than he could ever imagine. As production neared its final stages, the sense of unease surrounding Devon became impossible to ignore. The Russos had begun asking questions, and their once cordial relationship with him had turned icy. Meanwhile, the rival mob family he had supposedly aligned with was making bold moves of their own, creating chaos that threatened to expose everything. Devon found himself trapped between two powerful forces, both of whom viewed him as expendable. What began as a dream had spiraled into a nightmare. Devon Moretti, the man who had climbed to the pinnacle of Hollywood, was now balancing on the edge of a precipice. With enemies closing in on all sides and no one left to trust, he was about to learn the hard way that in a world where deals are made with devils, the price of success can be fatal. Eva DeMarco's arrival in Hollywood wasn't the stuff of fairy tales. She hadn't been plucked from obscurity or stumbled into fame by accident. Her path to the silver screen was calculated, driven by ambition, and something far darker: revenge. Eva was a woman with a purpose, and her ascent into the spotlight was part of a carefully laid plan. What most people didn't know was that her glamorous exterior masked a history of pain, loss, and simmering rage that had defined her life. Years before she set foot in Hollywood, Eva's world was shattered when her father, a low-level mob associate, was murdered. The official story was vague, the circumstances suspicious. He had been found in a rundown motel, his death ruled a suicide by overdose. But Eva never believed it. She had grown up overhearing conversations laced with tension and fear, knowing her father had ties to dangerous men. After his death, she pieced together enough to convince herself of one thing: the Russo family had been behind it. Her father had outlived his usefulness, and the Russos had disposed of him like garbage. That singular belief became the driving force behind her life. She vowed to dismantle the Russo family, not through brute force or open confrontation, but by using the very thing they valued most: their influence in Hollywood. Eva spent years honing her craft, perfecting her skills as an actress, and crafting an image of perfection. Every role she took, every audition she attended, was a step closer to her ultimate goal: infiltrating the world of Devon Moretti, the Russo family's golden boy in the film industry. By the time she caught Moretti's attention, Eva had perfected her persona. To the outside world, she was a rising starlet, a beauty with talent and charisma to spare. She exuded charm and innocence, the kind of actress every producer dreamed of working with. But beneath the surface, she was a predator, circling her prey with patience and precision. Moretti was captivated by her from the moment she stepped onto the set of his latest project, a gritty crime thriller poised to be the biggest film of his career. Eva's audition had been flawless, her performance undeniable. She was exactly what the film needed and exactly what Moretti didn't realize he should fear. Eva quickly became a fixture on the production, winning over the cast and crew with her work ethic and magnetic personality. But while she played the part of the dedicated actress perfectly, She was quietly observing, listening, and gathering every piece of information she could about Moretti and his ties to the Russos. She noticed the late-night phone calls, the unmarked envelopes exchanged on set, and the way certain visitors always seemed to linger in the shadows. Moretti was careful, but Eva was meticulous. She began to piece together the web of connections that tied him to the mob, and with each revelation, her resolve hardened. At the same time, Eva's rise in Hollywood was accelerating. Her performance in Morty's film was shaping up to be a breakthrough, the kind of role that could transform her into an A-list star. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if she could simply focus on her career, leave the past behind, and bask in the glow of success. But the thought was fleeting. The memory of her father's death, the injustice of it, was too deeply ingrained. She reminded herself why she had come to Hollywood in the first place. Fame was never the end goal, it was merely a tool, a means to an end. As the production moved forward, Eva's proximity to Moretti gave her access to the inner workings of his world. She began to notice cracks in his polished facade. He was clearly under pressure, juggling the demands of the film with the increasingly volatile relationship he had with the Russos. Eva could see the strain in his eyes, the weight of secrets he was trying to conceal. She knew she was getting closer to the truth, but she also knew she had to tread carefully. The Russo family was not to be trifled with, and any misstep could be deadly. Her opportunity came when she overheard a heated conversation between Moretti and one of the Russo enforcers. Though the details were vague, it was clear that Moretti was involved in something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. The enforcer's words carried an unmistakable warning, and Moretti's response, though calm, betrayed his growing desperation. Eva filed the interaction away, knowing it could be the key to unraveling his connection to the Russos. What Eva hadn't anticipated, however, was the extent of Moretti's own ambition. As much as he was a pawn in the Russo family's game, he was also playing a game of his own. Eva began to suspect that Moretti wasn't just laundering money or following orders, he was scheming, trying to carve out his own empire while keeping the Russos at bay. The realization complicated her plan. If Moretti was working against the Russos in some capacity, he could be a valuable ally. But trusting him, even for a moment, was a risk she wasn't sure she could afford. The deeper Eva delved into Moretti's world, the more dangerous her position became. The Russo family's presence on set was growing, their enforcers keeping a closer watch on Moretti, and by extension, everyone around him. Eva could feel the tension mounting, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. She knew she was playing a high-stakes game, one that could either lead to the revenge she had craved for years or destroy her completely. As the production neared its final stages, Eva found herself at a crossroads. She had gathered enough information to make her move, but the timing had to be perfect. One wrong step could expose her motives and put her directly in the Russo family's crosshairs. The question was no longer whether she could bring them down, it was whether she could do it without losing herself in the process. The stakes were higher than ever, and Eva knew that the next move she made could change everything. The production of Devon Moretti's film had become more than just a creative endeavor. It was a boiling pot of hidden agendas, rising tensions, and dangerous alliances. To most of the cast and crew, the growing presence of men in dark suits lurking on the fringes of the set was written off as overzealous security. But for those who paid closer attention, it was obvious that these men were far from ordinary bodyguards. Their demeanor, the way they watched everything with sharp, unblinking eyes, hinted at something far more sinister. They weren't there to ensure the film's success. They were there to protect the Russo family's investment. The Russo family had always been careful to keep their influence in Hollywood understated, but this time was different. Whispers were spreading that a rival crime syndicate, emboldened by recent missteps on the Russos' part, was beginning to make its move. The rival syndicate had grown increasingly bold in recent months, seizing control of illicit operations and challenging the Russos' dominance in the city. For the Russo family, the stakes had never been higher. The film wasn't just a financial opportunity, it had become a battleground, a chess piece in a larger war for power. Devon Moretti found himself caught in the middle of this escalating conflict. His position as the Russo family's most valuable Hollywood ally made him indispensable, but it also made him a target. The rival syndicate, aware of Devon's ties to the Russos, began to use underhanded tactics to disrupt the film's production. Equipment went missing, strange accidents occurred on set, and schedules were mysteriously delayed. To the untrained eye, these incidents appeared to be nothing more than the typical chaos of filmmaking, but Devon knew better. These were calculated moves designed to destabilize the project and send a message to the Russos. The pressure was mounting, and Devon's calm, polished exterior was beginning to crack. He was walking a fine line, trying to keep the film on track while appeasing the increasingly paranoid Russo family. To make matters worse, the rival syndicate wasn't the only threat. Within the Russo family itself, loyalties were being questioned. Devon had long been a trusted ally, but recent rumors suggested he might be playing both sides. The Russos weren't known for their forgiveness, and Devon knew that even the faintest suspicion of betrayal could be a death sentence. Eva DeMarco, meanwhile, had become an unwitting participant in this deadly game. Her role in the film had placed her in close proximity to Devon and, by extension, the Russo family. She had spent months carefully observing and gathering information, and now she found herself caught in the crossfire of a mob war. The enforcers who had once treated her with indifference were now watching her with wary eyes. Eva's calculated charm had always been her greatest weapon, but she could feel the walls closing in. She had to tread carefully. One wrong move could expose her true motives and ruin everything she had worked for. Despite the mounting danger, Eva continued to dig deeper into the connections between Devon and the Russo family. Her observations revealed a man under immense strain, a man who seemed to be carrying the weight of too many secrets. Devon wasn't just a pawn in the Russo family's operations, he was playing a game of his own. Eva began to suspect that he was quietly working to undermine the Russos, using the film as a cover for a much larger scheme. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. If Devon truly was working against the Russos, he could be a valuable ally in her quest for revenge. But trusting him was a gamble she wasn't sure she could afford. The rival syndicate, emboldened by the Russos' perceived vulnerability, escalated their efforts to disrupt the film. Their methods became bolder, more aggressive. One night, a fire broke out in the studio where the film's most expensive set pieces were stored. The blaze destroyed weeks of work and millions of dollars worth of equipment. Devon was livid, but he couldn't show it. He knew the fire wasn't an accident, but he also knew that going to the authorities was out of the question. This wasn't just a film anymore, it was a war zone, and Devon was running out of time to pick a side. The Russos responded to the attack with characteristic ruthlessness. Enforcers began to show up on set more frequently, their presence a constant reminder of who was really in charge. They weren't just there to protect their investment, they were there to send a message. The Russos had no intention of backing down, and anyone who stood in their way would face the consequences. For Eva, the increased presence of the Russo enforcers was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it gave her more opportunities to observe their operations and gather intelligence. On the other hand, it made her every move riskier. She was no longer just an actress trying to make her mark. She was a woman walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. The tension on set reached a boiling point when a member of the crew was found brutally beaten in the parking lot. The official story was that it had been a mugging, but everyone knew better. The man had been overheard complaining about the strange behavior of the Russo enforcers, and now he was in the hospital with a broken jaw. It was a chilling reminder of what happened to those who crossed the line. As the film entered its final stages of production, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Devon was running out of time to make his move, and the Russos were running out of patience. The rival syndicate was still circling, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And Eva, caught in the middle of it all, was beginning to realize just how dangerous her plan had become. The set of the film, once a place of creativity and ambition, had transformed into a battlefield. The air was thick with tension, every glance and gesture loaded with hidden meaning. Everyone was playing their own game, but no one knew who could be trusted. And in the shadows, the true puppet masters were pulling the strings, preparing for a final showdown that would change everything. As the film neared completion, the tension on set reached unbearable levels. What had started as a career-defining project for Devon Moretti had devolved into a volatile mix of paranoia, power struggles, and betrayal. The Russo family's enforcers had become a constant, ominous presence, watching every movement, every exchange, and every whisper with cold calculation. The rival syndicate's relentless attacks hadn't let up, and the sense of danger was palpable. Yet for Devon, the stakes were far greater than just finishing the movie. He was navigating a labyrinth of lies, trying to outmaneuver both the Russos and the rival family while keeping his ambitions alive. Devon's true plan was far more complex than anyone realized. Underneath the guise of an overworked film producer, he was quietly funneling a portion of the Russos' money into a secret offshore account. He had been doing so for years, but now he was preparing to take the boldest step yet. He intended to sever ties with the Russos entirely, using their own money to fund a new venture that would make him untouchable. He knew the risks. No one betrayed the Russos and lived to tell the tale. But Devon had convinced himself he could outsmart them, that he could disappear before they even realized what had happened. The rival syndicate, however, had begun to suspect Devon's duplicity. Their informants had pieced together fragments of his dealings, and they saw an opportunity to exploit the chaos. If Devon was working against the Russos, they could use him as a pawn in their own war. They sent a message, subtle but unmistakable, to let him know they were watching. For Devon, it was a chilling reminder that his every move was being scrutinized from all sides. He had no allies, only enemies waiting for him to slip. Unbeknownst to Devon, Eva DeMarco had discovered his secret. Her relentless observation had paid off, and she had unearthed the evidence of his financial scheme. For Eva, it was a revelation that changed everything. Devon wasn't just a pawn of the Russo family, he was playing his own dangerous game. This knowledge presented a dilemma. If she exposed Devon, it could destabilize the Russos and potentially weaken their hold on Hollywood. But it could also bring her closer to the crosshairs of the Russos and the rival syndicate alike. Eva had to decide whether to use this information as leverage or keep it in her back pocket until the perfect moment. On set, the atmosphere grew darker by the day. The cast and crew operated under a cloud of fear, their every action scrutinized by the ever-present enforcers. Even the smallest misstep seemed to carry dire consequences. Accidents continued to plague production, lights falling, unexplained power outages, and mysterious delays that no one could fully explain. The rival syndicate was clearly escalating its efforts, and the tension was beginning to fracture the once tightly knit production team. Everyone was walking on eggshells, afraid of becoming the next victim of the chaos swirling around them. The Russos, sensing that something was amiss, intensified their grip on Devon. Their demands became more frequent and more aggressive. Meetings that once involved polite exchanges had turned into veiled threats. They weren't just concerned about the rival syndicate's interference, they were beginning to question Devon's loyalty. The whispers of betrayal had reached them, and while they had no concrete proof, their instincts told them something wasn't right. For Devon, the pressure was suffocating. He had always thrived under stress, but this was different. He was playing a game where a single misstep could cost him his life. Eva, meanwhile, continued to maneuver carefully. She had become something of a confidante to Devon, using her charm and calculated empathy to earn his trust. Devon, desperate for someone to confide in, began to let his guard down around her. He revealed just enough to hint at the depths of his predicament without fully exposing his plans. Eva listened intently, filing away every detail for her own purposes. She wasn't just a passive observer, she was actively shaping the narrative, steering Devon toward decisions that could further her own agenda. The rival syndicate made its boldest move yet when they infiltrated the set during a night shoot. The intrusion was swift and calculated, designed to send a message without drawing too much attention. Equipment was destroyed, a key prop was stolen, and cryptic graffiti was left behind, mocking the Russos. The attack sent shockwaves through the production, leaving everyone shaken. For Devon, it was a wake-up call. The rival syndicate wasn't just toying with him, they were closing in. He realized that his carefully laid plans were beginning to unravel, and he had to act fast if he wanted to survive. The Russos responded to the attack with brutal efficiency. Their enforcers tightened their grip on the set, interrogating crew members and issuing ultimatums. Their presence, once menacing but subtle, had become overtly oppressive. The message was clear. They were losing patience, and they wouldn't hesitate to make an example of anyone who crossed them. Devon was walking a razor's edge, and he knew it. The walls were closing in, and his options were dwindling. For Eva, the chaos presented an opportunity. She began planting seeds of doubt among the crew, subtly suggesting that Devon's actions were putting everyone at risk. Her goal was to isolate him, to weaken his position and force him into a corner. At the same time, she continued to gather evidence, piecing together a narrative that could bring down not just Devon but the entire Russo empire. As the film approached its final days of shooting, the tension reached a fever pitch. The set had become a powder keg, ready to explode at the slightest spark. Devon, desperate to maintain control, doubled down on his efforts to finish the project. But even he couldn't ignore the storm brewing around him. The rival syndicate was circling, the Russos were growing more suspicious, and Eva was quietly orchestrating her own endgame. The stage was set for a dramatic conclusion, but no one could predict how it would unfold. Devon believed he could outsmart everyone, but his enemies were closing in from all sides. Eva's quest for revenge was nearing its climax, but the risks had never been higher. The Russos were tightening their grip, and the rival syndicate was preparing for a final strike. Everyone was playing their own game, but no one realized just how close they were to the edge of disaster. Eva DeMarco had spent months navigating this volatile world, inching closer to her goal with every calculated step. She had uncovered enough about Devon's financial schemes and the Russo family's illegal dealings to blow it all apart, yet she had held back, waiting for the perfect moment. Her patience was about to pay off. The chaos around her was a double-edged sword, dangerous, yes, but also an opportunity to strike at the very foundation of the power structure that had destroyed her father. Eva had positioned herself perfectly, but even she couldn't predict how quickly everything would unravel. On what was supposed to be the final day of shooting, tensions boiled over. Devon, desperate to tie up loose ends, had scheduled a critical scene to be filmed on location at a sprawling mansion in the Hollywood Hills. The set was buzzing with activity, but beneath the surface, it felt like a battlefield. Russo enforcers patrolled the perimeter, their presence a stark reminder of the high stakes at play. The rival syndicate, though unseen, was undoubtedly watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. And in the middle of it all was Eva, quietly observing, ready to act when the moment called for it. What no one realized was that Devon's secret was no longer as hidden as he thought. The rival syndicate had finally pieced together enough of his dealings to see him as both a threat and an opportunity. They had discovered his offshore accounts and his plans to siphon millions away from the Russos. For them, Devon wasn't just a loose end, he was leverage. If they could turn him against the Russos publicly, they could deliver a devastating blow to their rivals. But they weren't the only ones who had been watching. Eva had also gathered enough evidence to dismantle the Russo empire, and she had no intention of letting the rival syndicate take credit for it. As the cameras rolled on what should have been just another scene, chaos erupted. A group of armed men stormed the set, their faces obscured but their intentions clear. They weren't there for the film, they were there for Devon. The rival syndicate had made its move, and it was a bold one. Crew members scattered in panic as the men moved with precision, heading straight for Devon. The Russo enforcers reacted immediately, drawing weapons and turning the set into a war zone. The air was filled with shouts and the deafening crack of gunfire as the two factions clashed. In the midst of the chaos, Devon tried to escape, but his path was blocked at every turn. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, and for the first time, he realized just how precarious his position had always been. The Russos weren't coming to save him, they were more likely to cut their losses and let him fall. The rival syndicate wasn't offering him a way out, they wanted to use him as a pawn in their game. Devon was out of options, and he knew it. Eva, however, saw the pandemonium as her moment to strike. Amid the chaos, she slipped away unnoticed, heading straight for Devon's trailer. She had known for weeks that he kept backups of all his financial records and correspondence there, a safety net, in case he needed to make a quick escape. Now, it would be the final piece of her plan. She rifled through the papers and files, collecting everything she needed to expose both Devon and the Russo family. By the time she stepped out of the trailer, her heart pounding, the scene outside had reached a fever pitch. The rival syndicate's attack had escalated into a full-blown shootout, and the once grand mansion was now a scene of destruction. Russo enforcers were falling back, clearly outnumbered, but they were buying enough time for their higher-ups to make their escape. Devon, realizing the Russos were abandoning him, tried to flee on foot, but he didn't get far. One of the rival syndicate's men cornered him, ready to end it all. Before the rival syndicate could deliver the final blow, the sound of approaching sirens broke through the chaos. Someone had called the authorities, and the police arrived in force, breaking up the fight and scattering everyone involved. The rival syndicate's men disappeared into the night, while the Russo enforcers melted away as if they'd never been there. Devon was left standing alone, a man exposed, his secrets laid bare for anyone who cared to look. Eva stood at a distance, watching it all unfold. She could have walked away then, leaving Devon to face the consequences of his actions alone. But she had other plans. The evidence she had collected wasn't just about Devon, it was about dismantling the entire corrupt system that had allowed the Russo family to thrive. She made her way to the nearest police officer, handing over the files with a calm assurance that belied the storm she was about to unleash. The fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Devon was arrested on charges of embezzlement and conspiracy, his empire crumbling in a matter of hours. The Russo family, caught off guard by the depth of the evidence against them, found themselves under investigation for everything from money laundering to racketeering. The rival syndicate, though not directly implicated, was weakened by the loss of a key opportunity to strike at their rivals. Eva, for the first time in years, felt a sense of closure. She had come to Hollywood seeking revenge, and she had achieved it in a way no one could have anticipated. But her journey wasn't over. As she walked away from the chaos, she realized that she had become something more than an actress or a woman seeking justice. She had become a force to be reckoned with, a player in a game few could survive. The story of the film's disastrous production and the revelations that followed became the talk of Hollywood, a cautionary tale about the dangers of mixing art with power and crime. But Eva's name was conspicuously absent from the headlines. She had ensured her involvement remained a secret, her role in the downfall of Devon Moretti and the Russo family known only to her. For Eva, it wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about finally reclaiming the control she had lost all those years ago. As the city buzzed with gossip and speculation, Eva quietly disappeared, leaving behind a legacy of destruction and a reminder that in Hollywood, nothing is ever as it seems. And so ends the twisted tale of Hollywood and the mob, a deal with the devil. In a world where power, greed, and ambition collide, some will stop at nothing to get what they want. But in the end, even the most cunning players can fall victim to their own schemes. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and always question the truth.